The BYU Cougars and Kevin Young are flying high as they enter the Big 12 tournament as the 4 seed this week. What do they need to do to ensure that they have a nice run in Kansas City, but more importantly, a strong run in March Madness? I think there are 3 key areas they need to focus on.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And as always, thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Go to FanDuel.com to get started today. All right, let's dive right in on today's show and talk BYU basketball. Come up in a little bit, we'll talk a little BYU spring ball, and then we'll revert back to BYU basketball before we finish out the show, but flip over to the women's side of things with a coaching change taking place with the women's basketball program. But Kevin Young and the BYU men's basketball team are absolutely flying high right now. They're the number 4 seed. They're likely to move up in the national rankings today. When those come out, they may be out by the time some of you hear and or watch this. But we just saw yesterday Joe Lunardi, the premier bracketologist, the guy who founded bracketology in many respects, has BYU surging up the brackets to a number 5 seed playing in Denver. Now, here's the deal. If that comes to fruition, and they obviously play the dreaded 5-12, which traditionally has always been upset heavy with a 5-12 matchup, but playing in Denver, Colorado, remember the last time BYU played in Denver, if I recall correctly, was the Jimmer Fredette era. I might be wrong on that, but I'm going off the top of my head. The nice part is it'd be a local, fairly local matchup. You'd have a lot of Cougar fans obviously making the short flight from Salt Lake City over to Denver. There'd be plenty of Cougar fans on the front side of the range, as it were, out there. I know guys like Rich Wanacott, who are just Cougar fan diehards that live out there in the greater Denver area, will be showing up. A big shout out to Rich. He's a good dude out there, but I didn't mean to single him out specifically. But the bigger point to be made is BYU has got a lot of momentum behind them right now. They're riding an 8-game winning streak. They're likely to face Iowa State in a rematch of their game earlier last week in the quarterfinals of the Big 12 tournament. But as I look at this BYU basketball team and watching that game against Utah, and obviously looking at it as compared to what happened against Iowa State, I have come away with 3 key areas I believe that Kevin Young and the BYU basketball program need to focus on to ensure that they have, as I mentioned, a nice run in Kansas City, even if it is you beat Iowa State, make it to the semifinals, and then bow out against Houston. Just to have a good showing there, and then more importantly, have the pieces ready to put together to put on a run in March Madness. There are 3 key areas I'm going to be hoping that BYU focus on. I know that Kevin Young, as meticulous as he is as a coach, he'll have a whole lot more of those for his team. But the 3 places I'm looking at, number 1, work on starting faster. Remember, this was a team, BYU went to Iowa State and didn't score for nearly the first 6.5 minutes of that game. It was like 13-30 something when they finally got points on the board. BYU has to avoid starting slow. It's the same thing against the University of Utah. It's been a little bit of a trend here down the stretch, even though, as I mentioned, they're riding an 8-game win streak, and that's phenomenal. They have still started slow, and they need to avoid that here in the postseason. They're going to face bigger, better, more talented teams, especially when it comes to the Big 12 tournament, facing off against the likes of Houston. If you have the type of slow start that you had against an Iowa State against Houston, I'm not going to say that you're going to be able to hang in there, because I think Houston would absolutely have buried BYU in that circumstance. The other situation is that starting slow, the pressure mounts. And that's the thing about this. This is do or die time. The term survive in advance, that's what comes into the lexicon this time of year. You have 1 game to get it right. 1 game, move on. 1 game, go home. That's as simple as that. You have 40 minutes, and you starting out a game for the first 5 minutes, not quite sure of where you're going or what you're trying to do. That could be the difference between advancing or seeing your season end in a really quick fashion. And BYU has to avoid those slow starts. Second thing, rediscover the touch from beyond the arc. BYU's 3-point shooting, and this is crazy to say all this amidst the 8-game win streak, and I freely acknowledge that, but there are still some concerning signs amidst an absolutely incredible win streak for BYU, and that's finding their 3-point stroke. Remember, BYU didn't, I think they missed their first 13 attempts against Utah. Haven't shot it particularly well. It went 8 of 28 against Utah, if I recall correctly. Wasn't a very high percentage against Iowa State. And it's been a bit of a trend here that a lot of the damage BYU is doing right now is more at the rim. Now, they are very much an NBA-esque team where essentially their shots are either beyond the arc or at the rim. They don't shoot a lot of mid-range or have those jumpers inside the arc, but they've got to rediscover their touch from the three-point line. This is a time of year, once again, that teams that are hot from beyond the arc, they can put on incredible runs and go really deep in the NCAA tournament. Conversely, if you can't shoot, you can't hit big shots and hit timely shots at that, that's when you find yourself on the wrong side of margins. And as I said, quickly find yourself on the losing side and seeing your season end. BYU needs to rediscover that shooting touch. And I think that they can still rely upon getting to the rim and scoring. That's obviously a nice key that they've been able to rely upon, but you can't afford to not have your three-point shooting traveling with you. Now, you won't play another home game the rest of the year. It's all neutral site stuff. You'll play T-Mobile Center this week in Kansas City. If you play that Denver matchup and that 5-12 matchup that's being projected by Joe Lunardi, that's at Ball Arena, the home of the Denver Nuggets. So you're playing on neutral courts. You have got to be able to get into those gyms and dial in your range if you're a BYU Cougar. And obviously, new venues obviously have new sight lines, depth perception, all that type of stuff. Whatever it takes, find your range and find it quickly. They can't afford to be shooting poorly from three, it feels like, if they want to advance in March Madness. The final point I'm watching for BYU, and you're probably saying, is it turnovers? What is it, Jake? Rebounding. Utah absolutely just destroyed BYU on the glass on Saturday night. And this is a BYU team that's been very good by and large at rebounding the basketball. They rebound as a team typically. They have been able to generate extra looks. Kind of going back to what I've been talking about here, work on starting fast and rediscovering your arc, your shooting touch from beyond the arc. Getting these extra rebounds and extra possessions, that can help jumpstart an otherwise lifeless start to a game or get you an extra look at three where a guy who may have just missed it just barely resets his feet, hoists it up once again, and that three-pointer drops. These rebounds, especially offensive rebounds, are imperative for BYU to get after it. If they can rebound with authority, get back to doing what they were doing, because they've been a very, very strong rebounding team. There was a stretch earlier on in the season, I believe BYU was top 10 in the country in terms of rebounding margin. If they can get back to being a stronger rebounding team, that is going to be a big, big help to them. At, like I said, generating extra looks on the offensive side of things with regards to offensive rebounds. But at the same time, long rebounds on the defensive glass open up opportunities to run and transition for BYU, something they have been very keen on doing as this 8-game win streak has played out. This is a team that knows that they have to be able to play in transition, and getting those rebounds, especially long rebounds on defense, will absolutely help them in their quest to make a run here in March. I'm looking forward to this. And I didn't talk about turnovers. I think the turnover issue for BYU, it's been absolutely talked about ad nauseum at this point. Once again, I'll go back to the Iowa State game. If BYU has a game here in the postseason where they post 29 turnovers, that's what they had against Iowa State, and they somehow still won that game. I will say in the postseason, if they post 29 turnovers in any game, season's going to end right there and then. Now, Big 12 tournament, a little different, but I'm talking about in March Madness. So the three things that I want BYU to focus on this week, once again, start faster. And that entails getting into game-like scenarios in practice and telling guys, you need to make your first 2 or 3 shots before you finish this drill. You got to force these guys to get in that mindset of starting games faster. Number 2, get the guys in the gym hoisting up threes as much as they need to get their touch back, because it's not been a good run. And it's crazy, once again, to think that this is all this criticism coming amidst an 8-game win streak, but there are concerning signals I am seeing from my vantage point about this BYU basketball team, and I'd like to see them put together a really, really fun March for all of us. And I think rediscovering that touch from beyond the arc, and then rebounding with impunity, with authority. Get out there, get on the glass, and generate those extra looks, those transition opportunities, extra offensive possessions by getting the ball off the glass and use your rebounding advantage to your advantage. I think those 3 things be a big, big key cogs to helping BYU live their dreams here in March. And hey, we'll ultimately find out how it all plays out in very short order. They will be back in action on Thursday as they await the winner of Iowa State and the 12-13 matchup in the Big 12 tournament. So we'll have more for you guys as the week progresses here when it comes to BYU men's basketball. Any news, Kevin Young speaking to the media, all that type of stuff, we'll have you covered there. Coming up next, we're going to flip over to BYU football. There are 5 guys, I believe at this juncture, we're getting close to the halfway point of BYU's annual spring camp, who I would label as surprise breakout stars of spring camp. Who are they? We're delving into them next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Supply House. Now, Supply House is here for you guys to get you the supplies you need from the site made for skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order your products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with the complete inventory over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service. You'll always have a real person to talk to help you work through your issues. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trademaster program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn to take advantage with our friends at Supply House. Join the Trademaster program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use the promo code SH5, that's SH and the number 5, for 5% off your order. That's supplyhouse.com to get started today. Once again, go to supplyhouse.com today. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at Wayfair. Now, Wayfair is here for you guys, no matter what you're looking for when it comes to your home. Your home should reflect your style, and with Wayfair, it's easier than ever to make that happen. Whether you're looking for a simple refresh or tackling a big home project, Wayfair has everything you need in one place to get you on your way. Wayfair's huge selection makes it easy to find the perfect piece, no matter what your space or budget might be. From cozy furniture and stylish decor to kitchen essentials and outdoor must-haves, Wayfair has it all, my friends, and at prices that fit your budget. You obviously find easy shopping and delivery. The site is made simple to compare styles, and obviously your order arrived fast, and the best part is with free delivery. So get started today and head over to wayfair.com and find something that's just for your style today. That's Wayfair, wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, and of course, it's all for every home. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you all are doing well on this Monday. All right, so BYU spring camp rolls on. They will be practicing this week. Our next media availability will be tomorrow afternoon, so we'll have more for you guys for our Locked On Cougars Insider Group members. You'll get my notes shortly after that practice wraps up. But obviously, we'll have more for you guys as the week progresses on the football front. But as we kind of approach the halfway mark of the 15 practices, they participated. I think today they'll practice. That'll be 6 of 15. So we're not quite to the halfway point. But I believe that there are 5 guys from BYU spring camp who I would label as breakout stars here in spring. Now, I will add this caveat. Our media availability, we watch 20 to 30 minutes of what typically is a 2-hour practice. So it's a snapshot, but Kalani Sitake and his staff, they have not been shy about letting us watch team drills, full 11-on-11 action, full tackle drills. The last 2 practice sessions we've been able to watch the snapshot of. But there are 5 guys, like I said, who are standing out to me. And number 1 is a name that should be near and dear to your heart. It's Keelan Marion, obviously the All-American kick returner for BYU. Well, he is stepped up at wide receiver. Now, right now in practice, there's no Chase Roberts, who is recovering from offseason surgery. Darius Lassiter, it's highly unlikely, is what Kalani used the quote of him coming back to BYU for another year. And then other guys like Parker Kingston, they have not been participating in practice so far. So who has stepped up? It's not Darius Lassiter, Keelan Marion, excuse me. Keelan obviously very close to Darius. They were roommates, but Keelan has been really good at wide receiver in our option availability to watch him. Making big play after big play. Obviously, he's a threat to house a kick return anytime it comes to him in season. We saw that last year, but I'm liking what I'm seeing from him. He's stepping into a leadership role. He spoke to the media last week and has talked about how he has made strides, he feels like, in his game, trying to develop himself to be the best player he possibly can be. And if Keelan is going to be this good in season, well, BYU may not skip a beat, because essentially you would insert Keelan, in my mind, into the Darius Lassiter role opposite Chase Roberts, then have guys like JoJo Phillips, Parker Kingston, and some emerging younger players like a Tei Nakua, Cody Hagan, Dominique McKenzie, etc. Wide receiving core, it's stacked. the thing about this is all these guys, LaMason Waller, who's a early enrollee, all of them have skills. And the nice part is that wide receiving core is very good. But Keelan Marion, he's been really, really solid early on. Flipping over to the defense, Kenny Laufono-Hema at defensive end has been a guy that I've noticed has been really starting to emerge at D end. Now, there's a lot of young talent at the defensive end spot, but Fono-Hema has finally kind of grown into his frame. He was a really tall, rangy guy at Springville High School. They now list him at 6'5", 240 pounds, and he finally looks like he's got the meat on his bones requisite to allow him to really emerge at defensive end. Now, he will have to stave off some stiff competition. There's a lot of other defensive ends out there on this roster who are hungry to establish themselves, but I've been very impressed with Kenny Lau. He seems to make a play here every time we're out there at practice and has been very good both in pass rush and especially when it comes to rush defense as well at defensive end. Staying on the defense, number 3 on my list, Jonathan Cabella. Now, this is not a secret because Jay Hill already shouted him out for his stellar play at cornerback for BYU. I think BYU has found their next Eddie Heckard. Now, remember, Eddie a couple of years ago was a grad transfer in from Weber State College, 5'10", $190, and played all over the field. And Jacob Robinson kind of filled that role last year for BYU on his way to all-conference honors. Well, the next guy, I believe, is Jonathan Cabella. Cabella is listed at 5'10", 170-ish pounds, and he has been very, very good at slot corner role, but Eddie Heckard was unafraid of taking on the biggest, the brightest, and the best athletes he could find. And I think that Jonathan Cabella is very much on his path to doing that. But the nice part is Cabella, he may have redshirted last year. So he may be a redshirt freshman. If at worst, he's a sophomore. So you got potentially multiple years with this kid. And he's flashing a ton of potential at cornerback. And that should excite you as a Cougar fan because if you have Evan Johnson and Maury Bomba manning those outside corner spots, well, Cabella, his multifaceted role, playing that slot corner / nickelback role, that is a nice spot for him to slot in and obviously contribute at a high level. Flipping back to the offense, Pokai Haunga. Now, Haunga is known as nickname is Glitch. That's what the teammates gave him, or he's been known that for quite some time. I think we're finally starting to see him come into his own. He is going to play a multifaceted role similar to Cabella on defense, but on offense here for BYU. He grew up playing wide receiver. He's also played running back at Timpview High School, and BYU will use him in all those roles. He will be a guy who can come in, take the fly sweep and end arounds. He'll be able to run up the gut. The one thing I've liked, what I've seen so far in spring, is he's not afraid of contact. He's not the biggest running back on the roster. You have guys like Sione Moa who are battering rams compared to Pokai, but I love what Haunga has showed. He is unafraid of taking on contact. He's become more of a true running back in that sense, but the fact that he can play out as a slot receiver, can play in motion, all the different things he can do on offense for BYU, I think you're going to see him flourish this year in this BYU offense. At least I think so right now, because I think he's been very, very solid in spring camp. Now, my final player is a grad transfer to BYU, a guy who is seizing his opportunity, and that is Carson Ryan. Now, transfer from Utah. He's got 1 year to get it right. There's been a dearth of talent at tight end for BYU because of all the guys who graduated. Also, a guy like Reiner Swanson exiting the program to go on a mission for the next couple of years. Well, enter Carson Ryan, and he's been everything I think BYU could have hoped for when he came in from the University of Utah. He's got 4 years of college experience, 3 of them at UCLA, and obviously last year at the U of U. And I have seen him make play after play. If you look at the highlight reels that BYU puts out after every practice, number 20, he's on full display every single time, it feels like. Carson is going to be a big, big piece of this BYU offense. At least that's the way it looks right now. Could another tight end or tight ends step up? Maybe a guy like a Noah Moyaki supplant him? Maybe so, but I have not seen anybody at tight end make the plays and do what Carson Ryan has been capable of doing so far. It's been really, really impressive to watch him go out there and ply his trade. You can tell he's a veteran player. He has got the body control, the speed. He's a willing blocker. That's another thing about this. BYU's tight end unit seemingly has been split between pass catchers and blockers the last couple of seasons. Carson appears to be the nice meld of both of those. A willing blocker, may not be perfect blocking, but he sticks his nose in there and gets after it in the run blocking scheme. But then when he's out there in pass patterns, he makes himself available to guys like Jake Retzloff, and Jake has been very, very keen on finding him early on in spring camp. And a lot of you have been crowing about, hey, I want to see more from BYU's tight ends. Well, Carson Ryan might be that guy to bust the mold and emerge as the next star tight end for BYU. It's been really, really fun to see from him. So those are my 5 breakout stars so far from spring camp, but there's plenty of time for other guys to emerge. I put together an honorable mention list. I'd also include guys like John Taumoepeau at defensive tackle. I think he's been very solid. Anisi Purcell also at D tackle. Keanu Tanavasa is obviously, he's a known commodity at this point, so I didn't put him there. Austin Leusa at right tackle. He played right guard all last year, and there's some question about who is going to slide out at right tackle so far. Austin played right tackle at Southern Utah, and there was some concern that, hey, can he operate in space at the Power 4 level like he did at the FCS level? Well, he came to BYU, played guard mainly last year, but now he's slid out to right tackle, and I think he's been very solid so far. So keep an eye on Austin Leusa at right tackle. And then the final name on defensive line, Orion Maile-Kafusi. Orion, similar to Kini Lafonohema, has made multiple plays in the media viewing portion. He's a guy who came to BYU after a mission. Had originally opted to sign with Oregon State out of high school, then went on mission. Now he's back at BYU. He's been on the program, I think, 2 years now. So he's been really kind of waiting and working, but it seems they've been paying off so far in spring camp. So there's a few other names to pay attention to as spring camp rolls on. But we'll have more of these check-ins as spring camp continues, because I'm out there and I want to pass along what I'm seeing / what I'm hearing. And I think all of these players I've mentioned today, all of them will have a key role for BYU's success in 2025. And hopefully they all stay healthy for the long run here. All right, we'll finish up today's show talking BYU women's basketball. Amber Whiting is out. She officially parted ways with BYU over the weekend. What does it mean for the women's basketball program amidst a pretty strong run for football and men's basketball? We'll talk about that next as we wrap up this edition of Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is here for you guys with March Madness is here and is giving you the chance to get in on all the action like never before. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks used on everything from buzzer beaters to those Cinderella stories we all love in March Madness to even who's cutting down the nets. Obviously, all of us want to have our brackets be the perfect bracket. Okay, nobody ever really gets that, but if you want to have a leg up on that and prove it, hopefully win some money along the way, do it with our friends over at FanDuel. With tournament action happening almost every single day, there's always something exciting to bet on, so get in on it with our friends at FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com or download the app to get in on all the college hoops action all tournament long. Once again, cash into up to $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Once again, go to FanDuel.com to get started today with our friends over at FanDuel. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Another strong plug for you guys to join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. You guys are getting my notes from practice, the inside stuff that I'm seeing out on the field, even more in depth than I just went previously on the podcast today. If you want all of that, join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. It's a $5 a month charge, but the best part is you get a 14-day free trial, 2 full weeks to see if it's the right option for you. Join today by clicking the link in the show notes below, whether you're watching this on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, or just reach out. We'll get you squared away on social media or email. We can get you taken care of that way as well as a member of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right. Before we go on today's show, some news over the weekend. The BYU women's basketball coach, Amber Whiting, has used the term, quoted, parted ways with BYU. In 3 seasons, she never posted a winning record after taking over for Jeff Judkins. And I was mildly surprised that the final outcome was her being let go, or as they said, parting ways. I think this was more of a, let's say, a Gary Croton parting of ways, as it were. Remember, Gary Croton resigned under immense pressure back in 2004 for BYU. I think that was more of this situation. I was surprised that it came down to this, because I thought with the uncertainty around the AD situation with Tom Homo retiring, I would have thought that they would have given Amber Whiting at least a 1-year reprieve to see what she could do. She's been a very good recruiter. There's zero doubt about her ability to recruit. She's brought in her daughter, Amari Whiting, who's a top-tier athlete. Delaney Gibb, who just won Big 12 Freshman of the Year, was an absolute incredible signing for BYU. And overall, the recruiting's been at a fairly high level for BYU women's basketball under Amber Whiting. The concern is, though, that the results on the court were lacking. Remember, Jeff Judkins had this program rolling. They put together as a 20-some-odd win season his final year at BYU. And Juddy, I'll acknowledge a spade for a spade. he didn't want to necessarily retire when he did. I know that Juddy was getting towards the end because he's getting up there in age, but they decided to make a move and ultimately have Juddy step away and insert Amber Whiting as head coach. I think if they were to redo this all over again, and I'm never going to get a straight answer out of BYU on this, I'll be very blunt about that. But I believe if BYU would have done things differently, looking in retrospect now, they would allow Juddy to hang on for 1 or 2 more years because it really felt like that's all he had left in him, because Jeff had been absolutely awesome for BYU, an incredible 2-decade run at the helm of the BYU women's basketball program. I would say outside of Elaine Michaelis, probably one of the best women's coaches at BYU in their history, but that's beside the point. I think if they would have done this over again, you allow Juddy to have 1 or 2 more years. Amber Whiting comes in as an assistant coach on that team with the whole thought that she is the head coach in waiting to take over the program. They ultimately decided to go a different route. As we all know, Juddy gets sent into retirement, and they insert Amber Whiting. She'd only coached the AAU level and high school level before taking over a Power 4 job at BYU, and it just didn't work out. And there are so many different reasons why you could say that didn't work out, but there have been strong rumblings in the recent weeks that the roster was discontent with the direction the program was taking, and there was potential that a lot of players could hit the transfer portal and look at other options. Now, we all know that Amari Whiting has already told On3 that she will transfer. That's the least surprising news in all of this. She's the head coach, the former head coach's daughter. So Amari's not going to stick around. She obviously has the option to return to BYU if she so desires, depending on who they hire. But you've got to move quickly, it feels like, to secure this roster for BYU, especially hopefully keeping an athlete like Delaney Gibb around BYU. Yes, I know she's dating Jaeger Demon. I get all that. But the bigger point is the future of the BYU women's basketball program, it's going to be in the spotlight simply because the men's basketball program has so much spotlight on it. It's going to obviously kind of push over to the women's basketball team. Is Lee Camard ready to take over that program? Maybe so. There were many that thought that Lee should have gotten the opportunity to succeed Jeff Judkins 3 years ago. Lee's been a loyal soldier. He has been a very, very strong coach at BYU for many, many years. Is this his opportunity to finally take over a program and make it his own? TBD. But I would not get tunnel vision if I'm BYU, whether that's Tom Homo making the decision, whether it's Brian Santiago, who is the sport administrator and has really kind of been the main guy over both basketball programs forever, it feels like. Whoever is making this decision or decisions, I think it's the bigger picture, because obviously the board of trustees and the like will have their say on the final option as who the head coach will be. They need to spread a wide net. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say, guys, I've got a list of 5 names for BYU women's basketball coach I'm going to lay out for you right now. I acknowledge that I am very much lacking in that department, but circumstances being what they were with the women's basketball team are that they are in a very, very tough conference, obviously the Big 12, and it's a big opportunity at the same time for the right coach to come in and get things going once again. They weren't far off from posting winning records under Amber Whiting. And as I said, I would have felt like 1 more year probably would have been just, considering with the AD uncertainty, but she ultimately decided it was in her best interest to look at other options. And obviously BYU felt the same way. So they part ways. And now you look to the future for the BYU women's basketball team. I think it's got a big opportunity on it. Obviously, if you can have Delaney Gibbs stick around as kind of the centerpiece of this team and build around her, that's a good place to start. And a ton of coaches out there probably noticed that Delaney Gibb, was she like 10-time freshman of the year, freshman player of the week in the Big 12 this past year, on her way to unanimous Big 12 freshman of the year honors. So that is a piece that if you can keep in Provo and build around that, it's a nice building block to have in the women's game. Whoever takes over, they are going to have pressure on them because Jeff Judkins had it rolling. It's kind of fallen off here under Amber Whiting. And now who gets to step in and pick up the pieces? And can the person who replaces the person finally get it going once again? That's a very interesting situation for women's basketball. And I am very curious as to who gets that job and what they're ultimately able to accomplish here at the Big 12 level, because I would also imagine that the resources will be requisite for BYU to compete even in women's basketball. Well, in theory, they should be there. They should have all the resources. They have top-notch facilities. They share that the Marriott Annex with the men's basketball program, and we're talking weight room. All that type of stuff is top of the line. So there's a lot of good things about this women's basketball job, and it should attract, I think, a high number of suitors. But obviously, it's a unique institution. Speaking of BYU, and you got to find the right fit. So if it's Lee Cummard or anybody else, I will obviously be rooting them on. I'm looking forward to seeing who ultimately gets a shot at that job. All right, that's going to do it for this Monday edition of the show. As always, thank you for all y'all's support. Coming up on tomorrow's show, we're going to dig into some recruiting. I noticed something interesting with 24/7 Sports and their top tier of recruits, their top 300 list. There's a lot of guys that BYU has interest in on that list, and there's a lot of, let's say, positive talk about BYU. Is it founded or is it unfounded? Is it something that BYU fans should buy into? We'll delve into that tomorrow here on the podcast. But as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And once again, thank you for making making the show a part of your day and being an everydayer with us right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.